Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Glenn Eisen. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, and welcome to the author interview series. Today I'll be discussing the paper Quality of Colonoscopy Withdrawal, Technique and Variability in Adenoma Detection Rates with the primary author, Dr. Robert Lee, who is an assistant professor at University of California at Irvine. Welcome, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
How are you today?
Good.
Good. Well, I very much enjoyed reading your paper. Certainly there's a plethora of papers coming out these days on metrics for improving colonoscopy quality, and yours has a slightly different twist. Can you tell me the premise behind your paper and where you got the idea?
Sure. Really the genesis of this paper arose from the fact that we saw a lot in the medical literature which seems to suggest that there is a large degree of variability in adenoma detection rates among endoscopists. And we also noticed that there are endoscopist-related factors such as colonoscopy withdrawal time that seems to have an impact on adenoma detection rates. We also noticed that there are several studies which looked at continuous quality improvement measures that mandated minimal withdrawal times, which unfortunately didn't result in an increased adenoma detection rate among certain endoscopists who just don't seem to have very high adenoma detection rates. So we hypothesized that perhaps it might not necessarily be the amount of time that is taken during colonoscopy withdrawal in looking for polyps that makes the biggest difference, but it's actually the quality of mucosal inspection that seems to be the primary factor in determining adenoma detection rates.
So withdrawal time is clearly a surrogate for adenoma detection rates, which is in turn a surrogate for trying to avoid interval cancers and such. Where did you determine, or how did you determine, what constitutes a quality withdrawal technique?
Right. So what we utilized was a evaluation form that was originally pioneered by Dr. Rex from Indiana. And they utilized a videotaped assessment of colonoscopy withdrawal. And this evaluation system evaluated endoscopists in three key areas: the quality of fold examination, the quality of distension of the colon, and the quality of cleansing. And this system assigns a total of 5 points, 5 being the best quality, 0 being the worst, for 5 areas of the colon, and then they're all added up to give a composite technique score for that particular withdrawal.
Those seem like somewhat subjective measures. How are they quantified and agreed upon? Did you do any pre-testing to see if your scorers agreed on what constitutes a high score for looking behind folds?
Yeah, sure. What we did first, there were 3 reviewers amongst us, and we reviewed a total of 11 of the colonoscopy withdrawals together. So we sort of had established a baseline degree of agreement on what constituted a very good quality colonoscopy withdrawal versus what constituted a very bad quality of colonoscopy withdrawal. And then once we reviewed those initial 11 withdrawal videos, we then proceeded to review the rest of the video clips separately.
Okay. And what were the findings of your study?
Well, we essentially found that the colonoscopy withdrawal times among our 11 faculty endoscopists who had varying adenoma detection rates, and we subdivided those endoscopists into high ADR, high adenoma detection rate endoscopists, moderate and low adenoma detection rate endoscopists based upon their historical adenoma detection rates over the last year. What we found was essentially that the withdrawal times were not really significantly different among the 3 groups. However, we did notice that the high and moderate ADR endoscopists significantly had a higher technique scores compared to the lowest of the group of endoscopists in terms of adenoma detection rates. We also compared the 2 individual endoscopists, one who had the highest adenoma detection rate, which I believe was 64%, and the lowest detecting endoscopist who had an adenoma detection rate of less than 10%. We also compared those 2 individuals, and what we found was they had virtually the same mean colonoscopy withdrawal time, but the highest ADR endoscopist actually had a 2-fold higher withdrawal technique score than did the lowest ADR endoscopist.
Did you find that all of the endoscopists improved their ADR over the course of the study because of the Hawthorne effect, such the effect of being videotaped and watched just improves their technique?
Well, we had a very small sample size, so it was very hard to see a significant difference in terms of the number of adenomas that were detected during the recording period. We only did a total of 10 recordings for each endoscopist. But we did notice was that there was a Hawthorne effect when it came down to colonoscopy withdrawal time. It's certainly reasonable to surmise that perhaps the lowest detecting endoscopists, because they're being monitored, are prolonging their withdrawal time.
Did you share these results with the doctors as a CQI effort?
We haven't as of yet. We will shortly, and I think it's certainly reasonable to do so.
So, extrapolating your findings, clearly withdrawal time has its limitations. It's a weak surrogate, if anything. What are the recommendations you make going forward with this for other practices?
Well, we certainly recognize that measuring withdrawal technique is not an easy metric either. It's not reasonable to videotape endoscopists on a consistent basis and measure their withdrawal technique. I think what the study illustrates is that if you mandate a given withdrawal time, you're not necessarily going to achieve the goal of enhancing adenoma detection rates, because it's certainly possible that some endoscopists may just sort of play to the clock in terms of, they get to the rectum, they realize they haven't achieved 6 minutes, and they just sit there until—
Have some coffee.
Right, exactly. So I think what this really emphasizes is that perhaps adenoma detection rate should be the primary benchmark for quality in colonoscopy, because it really does incorporate aspects of both withdrawal time and withdrawal technique.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your interesting study with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Lee.